and welcome everyone to our final installment for the 2020 year of This Month in Cybersecurity. Coming at you with a little different view as I'm in a move process personally, but so we've got a kind of a boring background here today, but hope to have a new one for you here next week. Again, we try to cover some stories from the month, and specifically November. We're going to kind of go generic, I guess, with some of the stories here from November. Generic meaning they aren't necessarily, some of them occurred in the month of November, but we've got references for all the stories for you to refer back to. Again, our goal is just to kind of make you smarter from the perspective of, what happened and how can you prevent that from happening to you. So from an agenda perspective, we're really going to cover three topics. One I kind of wanted to cover a little more in depth, and that was the idea of identities. Identities are something I think we kind of take for granted. I put a little spin on it this year with Thanksgiving holiday coming up. And then wanted to talk a little bit about some threat vectors and tell some stories from that perspective. And last, I wanted to get you oriented to, normally we would discuss various vulnerabilities that surfaced during the month. And instead, while that's still part of the theme, I want to cover how our newsletters typically cover that and where you can find some stories around VMware, Microsoft, and others. So without further ado, let's discuss some identities. So we have this gentleman named Tom, okay? And Tom, like everyone else, has a number of things that are attributed to him. Email address, which oftentimes is your login, social security number, date of birth, and just a whole myriad of what the industry is calling private information, PII, PCI, whatever names you want to go by. It's basically information that you really would not like disclosed out there. However, I think we've all kind of come to the realization that for the most part, a lot of that information is out there. Okay, and specifically as consumers, we certainly see that. And the consumer side and the business side are two different worlds, right? The consumer side, we think, oh yeah, all these data breaches that have our credit cards, right? That's your personal information. Social security information, it's your personal information. But increasingly, and hopefully you've seen this as part of the stories we've been telling with This Month in Cyber, commercial information is grabbed, right? So when they're grabbing login information for organizations or third-party apps that happen to leak their database, that oftentimes is your login information. That's part of your commercial side, right, and the business side. So never the two, the two actually do meet with some frequency, right? Oftentimes your login and password, hopefully, that you use personally is not the same one that you're using for your business. But again, essentially with all of this information, really the key variable in a lot of this is your email address. And in fact, we're just going to focus on your email address today and what it means. Now, in this particular case, this gentleman's named tom.turkey@acme.com. And, that login information or that email address is important to him. He's had it for a while, but increasingly a number of systems, especially cloud-based, SaaS-based systems, use that tom.turkey@acme.com as the credentials to get into that system. And unfortunately, as we've seen over time, and I think I'm not telling you anything you didn't know, but breaches have been occurring, since, think back to MySpace, right? When MySpace was the thing, MySpace leaked a bunch of credentials. Well, oftentimes back in those days, you oftentimes just had one email address. Oftentimes it was your work email address. So even MySpace probably contained 30, 40, 50% of the addresses stolen were actually business email addresses, okay? Nowadays, that might be a little higher percentage of personal email addresses as opposed to business, but either way, that business email address also has taken on more importance as it's become login information too. So breaches aside, those breaches will happen, and certainly there will be dumps of data. Some of the biggest data breaches of the 21st century are listed here. Certainly we all remember, Yahoo's Marriott one turned out to be a big one up at the top of the list, not just in numbers. Think about the amount of data that was there. And then certainly Equifax down below. I point out Marriott and Equifax only because it was such a treasure trove of information. It was information that contained not only your login information oftentimes, but social security numbers, places of residence. It's just really a large dump of data. And those breaches in recent history have provided a lot of groundwork, and we'll kind of tell that story as to what's happening with that information nowadays as we proceed in this. We'll talk about that. So these identities are available out on the dark web or even available on some commercial databases. And really, obviously, good data, extensive amount of data about a particular individual can be expensive, right? You can spend for the complete identity of an individual, meaning everything that they own, operate, and so forth, from the credit cards to so forth. It's all available out there. But if it's aggregated for you, you're going to pay, potentially up to $1,000 for one person's identity. However, for that same $1,000, I might be able to get you 1 million or 2 million email addresses that were used in the last year. Okay, so imagine the volume of data that one could, especially recent data about someone for just email addresses. If you're not trying to target somebody, but you're just in general trying to hit a number of emails that have been recently used. Tom Turkey over there, his number is A, going to show up in a number of databases, and B, be available for sale to an indiscriminate shopper that's going out looking for it. I have another graphic that kind of talks about some of the data leaks. This is from a website many of you may know called Have I Been Pwned? And they just talk about some of the breaches and which ones are making additions into their catalogs. And so you can kind of go to the website and see, wow, here's a new database that got added in yesterday with 32 million email addresses, right? Those are fresh, hot, great login information to go out. And if I was a buyer out on the dark web market looking for login and password information, that's where I'm going to find Tom Turkey's most recent login and password information. So, the indiscriminate or the hacktivist, if you will, is going out and finding some of this information, adding it into the bag, making their purchase, and now it's time to run the tools, right? And those tools can be a number of things for what they're going to do, but let's talk more about how this email address is getting used in just a moment. Another thing that's kind of adding fuel into this is the idea of ransomware. So a lot of people are, kind of shifted their attention from, identity theft into ransomware. Well, ransomware, keep in mind, ransomware is an end game. And I think hopefully if you've been paying attention to This Month in Cyber for the last several months specifically, we've been talking about ransomware and how really ransomware is the very tail end of what's occurred. So they've infiltrated your organization. Okay, they've discovered where they've mapped out where the data is. They've stolen all the logins and passwords. I had a most recent ransomware that was done. I was reading about it, and they used organization used something called TrickBot. And TrickBot was used to steal. It's part of the Emotet ransomware family. It's actually a tool built into the ransomware. So the first thing before ransomware occurs is the Emotet goes out, and for any endpoint that is compromised, it's actually looking in browser histories. It's looking at browser cookies. It's looking at the workstation data, and it's basically gathering all the login and password information it can before it applies ransomware to that device. So in this particular case, and this was for a hospital system that got attacked. They had about 1,000 endpoints at this particular time. They were able to steal passwords from endpoints on more than 300 websites and services. So they had almost all the login and password information for almost all the applications, for almost all the employees, depending on who got impacted by the ransomware, which was most of the people at the end of the day. So just kind of remember, ransomware is just another masking for data dumps, right? Data gathering, data dumps, and it's not going to go private, and there's not going to be a discussion about the breach, but the ransomware was stealing the logins and passwords. It was also stealing the corporate data, and oftentimes what you're seeing now, prior to the ransomware actually going in the workstations, is an opportunity for you to purchase the ransomware keys prior to the ransomware being done, or hey, we've stolen some of your proprietary data. Would you like us to not announce it to the world? And if so, pay us X amount. So it's like almost a hijacking of your data prior to the ransomware too. So in any way that they can steal it, a login and password, data, and then ransomware, they're trying to extract payment. Here's some things we've learned about identities, and I thought we'd just kind of put these to paper because and these have source documents kind of next to them from an article perspective, but let's kind of get to the brass tacks. What do we care about? It seems readily apparent based on the data, and I'll show you the source, that putting time and energy into longer passwords is not necessarily the answer to better security. It does provide better security, no doubt about it. And if you are applying good long, complex passwords with a frequent change interval, specifically focusing on admin accounts with some regularity, and maybe avoiding some of the common things that get guessed, you're going to be in a better position than those that don't, no doubt. That said, there's a fair amount of time and energy to get people to memorize longer passwords, and a fair amount of I'll call it IT capital that you're using up with your user base so that might not be the best time investment. And instead, something like multi-factor authentication might be, let's ignore where the passwords are at today. Let's leave them at 8 characters and complex. And instead of going to 16 characters and complex, let's move to and a more frequent change interval. Let's go to MFA. But if you go to MFA, let's know that MFA is certainly better than passwords, no doubt, but avoid using SMS and phone-based. When MFA first came out, and you'll see the source here is Microsoft themselves. When MFA first came out, SMS and phone, placing a phone call, are not an encrypted transaction, and therefore really are kind of at the bottom of the poll with regards to a second factor. Better would be using an application which has an encrypted conversation between itself and the server to provide that authentication code. And let's remember, passwords are what you know. Okay, that's kind of level 1. MFA or multi-factor authentication or a second factor is what you have. So usually it's a phone and an application. And then the third factor and the highest factor is biometrics, and it's who you are. So what you know, what you have, and who you are. That said, multi-factor authentication using that second level using applications is likely best. And third, plan on getting breached. Okay, do you have a plan for when you get breached? And specifically, you might say yes. And then furthermore, are you detecting that breaches are occurring? If you don't have a plan, I think you're certainly set up for failure. And again, we've got some sources there that would indicate why this is, and let's maybe dive into some of those things. As you may recall, one of the things around planning is, and I've certainly used this slide before, but let's rehash it. For Office 365 specifically, Microsoft is on record stating that 0.5% or half of 1% of all accounts in Azure Active Directory, which is Office 365 accounts, are breached each month. Half of 1% each month. So what does that mean? For a 1,000 user organization, that means you should expect on a monthly basis 5 accounts to get compromised. Okay. If you're a 1,000 user organization, that's the number. If you're a 100 user, you're only going to see a tenth of that, right? Well, half of an account per month. But that means every 2 months, you're going to see 1 account compromised. Are you detecting that? Is that the level that you're seeing in terms of password breaches, or are you not looking? So I guess we kind of want you to be looking, and we want you to set up your detection. We want you to set up a plan. Yes, I saw that this was breached. I know that because of this. Looking in these logs, I've got this log analysis software. I've got either some services you're running around that or some software to help you. And furthermore, when Microsoft sees these breaches, they are breached 40% of the time. Those passwords are just guessed, right? So poor use of passwords, or the passwords are Chicago Bears 123, things of that nature. So you might think it's easy, but increasingly that guessed amount is doubling, right? Because the computer strength and the ability to guess even variations of typical passwords is going up and up over time. So that that ability to guess your password is increasing, and hackers are having a much easier time getting to that. Obviously, there's also reuse, right? Those occasions where on the commercial side, on the consumer side, and on the commercial side, they're using the same logins and passwords, and obviously it's a big no-no, but it happens out there, and 40% of the time that's what's occurring, and then some of the times phishing is occurring. And again, not only are we seeing 5 breaches, but in fact, that's actually gone to 7 breaches in recent months, again, due to better guessing capability. So those two unhappy faces kind of go over in the guess column. So in any case, identities are bad, leakages are occurring, and here's that quote from Microsoft, right, 0.5%. And then if an account is compromised, there's a very good chance that it did not have MFA. Microsoft's a big fan of MFA. They're pushing it, and the reason they're pushing it is because they see the evidence. The fact is we can't rely on Office 365 to have security when 0.5% of our accounts are getting compromised every month. So you have to have a plan here, and so identity is a key component of anyone's security plan. Some of the indicators of compromise, if you want to go look, right, this is kind of what we hear up on our managed service desk. This is what we see all the time. Foreign mailbox logins. You can go up to our service desk all the time. We're looking at mailboxes on behalf of a lot of our customers. We see foreign mailboxes, I'm going to say, in the dozens, at least half a dozen to a dozen per week. Okay. We're monitoring a fair amount of mailboxes. I hope that you're looking at your mailboxes and looking at logins for your organization. If you're not, we have an Office 365 service that will do it. We also see mailbox forwarding, where people are just putting improper rules, and it's not people. People that have access to your account are putting new rules in there to forward that mail out. They're also hiding their tracks by taking some of the threads for emails and using those forwarding rules to put it down in RSS folders or other folders. They're bypassing audit standards and turning off auditing. And sometimes audit logging is not even turned on. So in any case, a lot of these are indications of compromise. We're looking for about 20 on a daily basis, and we're looking at about 40 or 45 on an annual basis. All right. Out of identity, let's kind of just talk about the major 3 vectors. We just spent a great deal of time talking about identity. I guess I'd tell you one story that occurred even this past month. We had a customer that had several of their executives had unemployment insurance claims made against their account. And it was surprising to them because a lot of the information that they'd been provided, name, email address, social security, salary information, was all highly accurate, right? And this were, 5, 10 executives at an organization. Unemployment claims were being made. Obviously, the organization saw them because the claims were coming in, and they had to say yes or no to those claims, and then you can imagine the executive surprise when their information was found to be out there. Hopefully, by attending this month in cyber, you're well aware of the fact that all of this information is out there. Right? The Marriott breach and the Equifax breach means you should just assume your information's out there. That said, what are you doing about it? What procedures do you have in-house to be evaluating unemployment claims? What monitoring are you doing on your employees' behalf? If you're not doing it for your employees, are they doing it as consumers to watch their taxes being filed on their behalf, to watch for insurance claims like this, and so forth. So in this particular case, they got notified. They obviously were able to stop it. But what they're not able to do is provide any comfort to their employees that their information is out there, right? It just is. So a lot of times that's on the consumer side, that's freezing your credit and doing some other intelligent things, credit monitoring services and so forth. But let's talk about another threat vector, and that is emails. We had a customer this month that also just had a series of their customers. So this is kind of customers and vendors saying, hey, we're seeing some strange emails on your behalf. This is a sizable organization, about 300 users, and suddenly they're getting notified that, that by their customers that they're seeing some strange emails. Well, indeed, what had happened is one of their email addresses had been compromised, and it was flowing out to their customers and vendors. So it's kind of the last time you want to be notified, right, is by someone who might be impacted or was caught from a security awareness perspective, caught being out in the wild. So you really want to catch it sooner than after emails are being sent out. But this is exactly how business email compromises happen, right? They're into your mailbox, and then they're sending emails on your behalf, trying to change bank routing information, change payment instructions, basically looking for additional login and password information through phishing emails that now look a lot better because they look to be from you. So this happens quite often. Obviously, there's no silver bullet for this, but we have mentioned a number of strategies in the past, such as better technology for evaluating the emails, security awareness training, and a number of things that we offer in this space. But it all kind of comes back oftentimes to identity, someone getting into your mailbox, so you can kind of look at both identity and email as two vectors of built from the same cloth. And the last part I'm going to cover is just on data loss. So data loss is the data theft that we talked about before ransomware. It's also the inadvertent loss of email potentially going out, or now with Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint, we often are sharing a lot of links of information. Or with SaaS applications, employees feel entitled to have applications that IT has not necessarily governed or chartered. So it might be while you offer OneDrive to all of your employees and think that everyone's using it, they've found Box to be more friendly, or Dropbox more friendly, or Google Drive. And therefore, they take their data and they're leveraging these applications with or without your knowledge, consent, and certainly without governance. And so we certainly have capabilities to govern SaaS-based applications, but really the focus here is, where is your data and where do you want your data to be? And so there are technologies, and so we had again an account that lost some of their proprietary recipes this past month. They're in the food industry, and they believe some of that data was part of the compromise. And we had another organization that had one of their account managers leave, and they saw a number of emails and uploads to Google Drive and emails to Gmail, indicating loss of some of those accounts and key accounts for them. So this stuff happens, and data loss prevention is the term for kind of keeping things where they need to be, but it's certainly one of the three major stools of threat vectors for you as organizations. So in the time remaining, I thought we'd just kind of touch on our newsletter, and not here to bore you with newsletters necessarily, and we're not going to look at one specifically, but I want you to know that they're out there, and I want you to know that they're a tool for you. Oftentimes you'll see each month we put in what upcoming events we have, and we have no further marketing events for the year. This month in cyber, obviously for December, we don't have, just due to the holidays, but we have a what's new section, kind of what we're focused on, focus areas. We have recent blog posts that we've been trying to evangelize around, and then we usually have an employee highlight. After all, we are a family-owned business, and a lot of the folks in our organization are very interesting in that their backgrounds are interesting. They've been with our firm a long time, and it's sometimes interesting to find out a little bit more about them. So in these newsletters, one of the things you're going to find out are things that we talked about, and this was last month, although the story continues. VMware has come out with now 3 sets of patches. I think the third one actually is a replacement for the first one, but if you have VMware, pay attention. Certainly go to our newsletter from November to kind of get started. There's certainly a lot of patches. CVE 2020-3992 is the one that was allowing some access to VMware hosts and therefore into guest partitions that you don't want to participate in. And then Microsoft had a big thing. This started in October. We continue to kind of work on it with our customers. It's a vulnerability in the NetLogon secure channel. And There are some very simple things to apply, but we're helping our customers kind of walk through that and make sure that the fix doesn't break something else. There's some steps you can take to kind of put this in lockstep. So also we talked about, I think in previous months, and certainly we review this as part of our newsletters, the OFAC ruling for ransomware, which was important. Talked about why people can really no longer pay ransoms depending on where the ransomware came from. And this is going to put a damper on some people whose backup plan was, well, my backup tapes don't work and I didn't pay enough attention there. I'm sure I'll just pay the ransom. Well, oftentimes now your hands are tied and you can't. So your options really are becoming much more limited in that space. Finally, just to kind of drop this on you, we have a number of things that we think you should be doing from a security perspective. We try to lay that out in some prescriptive guidance. A lot of these are managed services where you may have some technology, and our role is simply to put good process and people behind it. In other cases, it's the entire bundle, but we try to make it easy. And in several of these instances where whether you're in the crawl, walk, or kind of run phase of security, depending on your model and needs, there's capability to try them out. So our security review for Office 365, port scans, and security awareness all have free trials to them where you can sign up on our website, raise your hand even during this meeting, and we're happy to set you up. It might be a great way to test your security awareness for your organization. Where do your employees sit today in terms of how many would actually open an email? Well, traditional industry finding is 18. We're kind of seeing more in the 20% of or so tend to open emails when sent a phishing email on purpose with the goal of just doing some user testing and baselining. So interesting things, if nothing else. And then for highly qualified customers, one of the technologies we're very excited about from a protection perspective is it's at the DNS layer, meaning anything, application, user, browser going out to the internet. We want that traffic to be well protected and know that it's going to a legitimate site. And DNS protection provided by Cisco Umbrella, which is on all your servers and endpoints, even your infrastructure and IoT devices can be protected by something like Cisco Umbrella, and we have a trial of that for qualified customers too. I put up some recent blogs that we talked about. If there's something of interest, certainly we blog a few times per week with some additional details around things that we're thinking. I'd love for you to check out that site. Otherwise, we'll reserve the rest of the time for any Q&A. We can stop the recording if that's fine, Samantha.